Welcome to Season 10, Episode 18 of the Ubuntu podcast. In this episode, we're going to discuss the Linux desktop apocalypse. We'll have some command line love and go over your feedback. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Martin.
Hello.
And Alan.
Well, hello there.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Tickety-boo, how are you?
Bad.
All recovered after our Foss Talk Live extravaganza?
Yes.
That was an extravaganza, was it? Okay. I put Fowcroft back in his little box, and he's hidden away until next year.
With these tea bags to soak up any damp that you might encounter.
Yes, he's put.
You might even have a brother by next time.
No, I don't think so, but
No.
maybe. What have you been up to, Martin?
Well, I have been creating a green screen system so I can go on Google Hangouts and have fake backgrounds behind me.
And don't I know it?
Yes, you have been.
So is this you've like transformed your office into some sort of studio environment with like one massive wall of green?
I think studio might be massively overstating it somewhat. I've had a green screen for some time, which was really used as like a privacy curtain for one side of the office when it got messy. And
you gave up doing that, didn't you? And we could just see all the stuff behind you on the
clutter
desk.
behind me. Yeah. But then the aspiration was always to try and like use it as a proper green screen. And I've now got this little HDMI capture card. So I've got the webcam captures me and the green screen, and then I use OBS, Open Broadcast Studio, to then manipulate that image and replace the green screen with either a static image or what I have found to be much more fun. I've found like you can get rolling loops of video of different scenes and you can have that in the background so you can put yourself on the beach with the waves rolling in or whatever. And endless amusement for me in my video calls with work.
It's way more amusing for the other person. I'll tell you that for sure. Every time I would alt tab back to my browser window, and there's Martin on a beach or on a chair or in the background. But then when he's composing this thing, he picks up his head and shoulders and moves it around the screen, and I just see Martin flying around the screen. It's very weird and disconcerting, but it's very funny.
Yeah,
it's good fun. I enjoyed it. So much so that I've ordered a green screen from Amazon today.
Oh dear.
What have you been up to, Mark?
What have I been up to? I have been playing with a new toy. It's a Precision 5520 laptop from Dell. Which they sent us to review. So I have been thoroughly putting it through its paces. Some things that are new to me, such as having a high DPI screen. So that's been interesting to understand all the foibles of that.
Is it shipped by default with Ubuntu?
It does.
I mean, these are all like questions we'll have when we come to do the review proper. But
yes.
On that point, when will this review air of this particular laptop?
You want to know all the important details, don't you? I think we can probably record the review in our next recording, if that's...
So 1 week from now as you listen to this?
Yes.
Excellent.
So it'll probably go out sometime in mid-July, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So sweet. I think this Dell Precision 5520 is basically like the Dell XPS 15, but
Possibly.
with Ubuntu pre-installed on it.
Yes.
So I shall be very interested to hear this review. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah. It is by far the most powerful laptop I've ever used. So yes, looking forward to giving it the review.
Excellent.
Yeah. So how about you, Alan? What have you been doing?
Guess what? I've got a laptop too.
What a coincidence.
Yes, Entroware sent me a laptop. It arrived, they contacted me over the weekend and shipped it Monday, and it arrived today, which I have to say is by far the smoothest experience we've had so far with receiving review units, I think. More on that another time, I think. But it's currently sat on my desk running Phoronix Test Suite, or attempting to run Phoronix Test Suite. Not a problem with the laptop, but a problem with Phoronix Test Suite itself. It's currently running that, and that's part of the benchmark I'll be doing, and a whole load of other stuff, much like Mark said, like testing all the stuff out, making sure It runs well and answering all the
Did you have
questions that people ask us, really.
Did you have the previous Apollo for review, or was that me? I can't remember
No,
now.
I think that was you. I've not had any Entroware laptops.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I had the Dell XPS 13 about 3 months ago now. I went back and looked, and it was a long time ago.
Wow.
But
Yeah, time flies.
the cool thing about this Entroware laptop is that Entroware have said we can give it away to a listener. So
Ooh.
we're not going to keep it. We're going to give it away to one of you.
Who are we going to give it to,
listening now.
Alan?
Whoever
Well.
gives us the most money, obviously.
That is yet to be decided, but we will probably announce some kind of contest. We will have to be careful to make sure that we are fair, but we want to be somewhat similar to the contests we've done in the recent past, where we want our listeners to be creative and do something that adds value to the world.
Gives us
Arguable.
some easy content to read out.
Yeah, and something anybody can enter regardless of what their skill set might be.
Exactly. So it won't be like, you have to write code or anything like that. But that might be something you could do. We'll see.
Wow.
We haven't figured out the details, but once we do, we shall let you know.
And when will that review go out, Alan?
So that'll be in about a month, I
Okay.
think.
Right.
So that'll be mid-August. You can
So
expect the review to go out.
We'll launch the competition when we do the review.
Yeah.
We might launch the competition a bit early, actually, just to get everyone ready and have them thinking. And then when they hear the review, they can start sending all their stuff in. And then once we get the results, I'll have packaged this all up. I've taken just so that people are, happy. I've taken an image of it as it was from the factory, and I'll put that back on it. So it goes back to factory reset, and I'll put it all back in the box and ship it off.
Cool.
Minus cat fur and cigarette burns and
Wow, so that's two laptop reviews coming up and a laptop giveaway. This is a bumper season for laptop stuff.
it is a bit.
We should probably
Should we get
find
on-
out if people enjoy listening to all that laptop stuff.
Should we get on with it?
Yeah.
Let's.
So we thought we'd have a little discussion and nothing contentious. Let's start with the Linux desktop is dead. Long live the Linux desktop, though, because the reason I wanted to talk about this is really because over the last few months, Martin and I have been talking to a lot of people, developers, and people in the Linux desktop space, and it's got into my head that people aren't developing new applications for Linux. So it's not necessarily that the Linux distros are dead and nobody's using Linux, because that's clearly not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Because a recent published survey said that actually Linux desktop usage has gone up. But it seems like people aren't developing apps for Linux. Am I right or am I wrong?
When you say apps for Linux, what do you mean exactly?
Okay, so I don't mean Android apps. I'm talking the Linux desktop.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like people aren't... Like, if you want to create an Android app, you would use Android Studio or one of the other tools, and you would create your app and you make it for Android. And, there's a very well-defined process there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making an iOS app, then Xcode. If you're making, or similar for OS X, you use Xcode or whatever tools. You might use other tools, and other tools are available, sure. And on Windows, you might use Visual Studio or something like that. And yes, there are other tools that are cross-platform like Unity 3D and so on. But it feels to me that there's nobody really creating, despite the fact that we've got all of these rich toolkits like GTK, like Qt, and it feels to me like nobody's creating new, innovative stuff specifically for Linux.
So are you talking about the traditional desktop Linux stuff like KDE and Gnome, like KDE applications that integrate with that ecosystem of applications and the desktop environment, and the same for Gnome?
Right. So I look at my desktop and I think about, what new applications that have originated on the Linux desktop have I installed in the last 3 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Is this because more apps are being developed cross-platform, so they're on Linux? They happen to be on Linux by coincidence, but they're also just developed using some other, like some cross-platform tool chain.
That certainly could be part of it. When I'm talking to developers, if I'm at either an event like a trade show where developers hang out, or if I'm at a meetup or something, and I ask, what are you using to develop applications? I'll often hear that people are developing Node applications, or maybe they're using Go, maybe they're using Python, maybe they're doing microservices, or they're using Amazon Lambda or services and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody ever says to me, I'm creating GTK apps. I mean, maybe I'm hanging out in the wrong places.
Well, is that because people you just mentioned a load of things that you can use to create a GTK app there. So are you thinking about stuff that's like integrating with a Linux desktop environment, or are you just talking about something which will run on Linux and vaguely fit in?
Well, a bit of both. I mean, so is a lot of the people, when I'm talking to, they're developing not desktop apps. So it might be command line utilities, or it might be services.
Yeah.
But whenever I'm talking to someone who is developing a desktop app, they're doing it using it could be like Cordova, it could be some web-based application, or they could be using Unity 3D to do a game, or some other game engine, or more commonly something like Electron. And I know it's seen as a filthy, dirty word in the Linux community because it's not a native toolkit.
Yeah.
How dare you use Electron to build your application on a Mac and then bring it over to Linux? How dare you increase the software availability on Linux from your Mac? That it seems ludicrous to me, but the fact remains that nobody seems to be developing brand new Qt, GTK, or whatever other Linux native toolkits there are.
That Electron isn't native argument doesn't quite stand up for me, though, because it's just as not native on Linux as it is on Mac OS or Windows.
Right. But the people on Windows and the Mac don't seem to care as much. So, like, if someone said, hey, there's this Discord app on to a Windows user, the Windows user doesn't say, well, what toolkit was used to create it? Nobody cares. And on the Mac, like some people, yes, okay, there are some people who like things to be well integrated into the platform. But generally, if someone says, hey, there's this service, here's an application that allows you to access that service or, manage your device or whatever it is the application does, they don't say what toolkit was it created with. They'll say, what are the features? How can I get it? How functional is it?
Is the difference there that, for example, on Windows, there's never really been a situation where, there was one place to get apps from and they followed some sort of standard design principles. It was always you go to a website, you get an app made by someone in some technology, it doesn't look anything like another app you got, might not even have the window buttons looking the same because it uses some weird skinning. But I suppose in the past on Linux, we're more used to you'd either have a KDE desktop or a Gnome desktop, and it would come with your distro would come with a bunch of applications for that desktop. So that sort of ingrained us into the idea that having an integrated desktop environment experience and the apps that go with it is good.
Right.
Is that why there's a pushback against sort of more standalone apps coming into that?
Possibly. I think this is why I'm asking the question. I'm making observation and asking a question. And I think from Microsoft's side on Windows, you could either see two heads of the coin, which is it's either an open platform, and I know some would argue Windows is not an open platform because it doesn't meet, open source or FSF or whatever, like our definition of open. But from the Windows side, it's an open platform that you can develop anything you want, put a Windows installer out there and download it and install it. And yes, that led to the wild west of Windows applications that all look different, are all freaky deaky, but people ran them, right?
Yeah.
And it was successful.
Yeah.
Yet we're trying to shove people in these boxes of, I don't know whether it's I know the old, I'm not installing that, it's KDE and I don't have KDE on my machine, therefore I'm going to pull in hundreds of trillions of gigabytes of libraries and I don't want that. The ludicrous, stuff that people say when they have to install something that uses, oh my gosh, a different toolkit, right? But it just feels like people want their cake and eat it. They want people to make these apps, but they don't want new apps to come onto the platform that weren't made with these toolkits.
So the reality of the situation is that you've got to attract developers to make native applications for your desktop operating system. It doesn't matter whether it's KDE or GNOME, but our, let's say, 3% of the desktop market is fragmented between different toolkits and different desktop paradigms and different desktop environments. So what would happen if somebody came along and suddenly everyone started making their applications for KDE? Would that then upset everyone who was running GNOME? And they would say, well, everyone's doing it wrong because they're making them for KDE, not GNOME. Whereas when you're making Electron applications, as far as I'm concerned, it has a menu bar in the right place, it has Windows controls in the right place, it puts app indicators in the right place. It might be web technologies underneath, but it integrates with my desktop in all the right ways.
Right. I didn't really want to get back into the horrible desktop wars of KDE versus GNOME. And I'm not saying you did, but I think you're right. And I think it used to be I'm not touching that because it's KDE, or I'm not touching that because it's JTK. And now people are unified, like fight together against the scourge, which is Electron. We've spoken to Joey, and he's told us that he gets a fair amount of negative press if he ever covers an Electron app on OMG Ubuntu. But if you look, you think about the last 3 applications you installed on your laptop, and I would urge our listeners to think about the last 3 new things. Not, I've just installed a laptop and I installed Kdenlive VLC, Firefox and that. But what brand new thing that you did that didn't exist a year ago did you install on your laptop?
Or you didn't know existed a year ago?
Yeah. And was it written with a Linux native toolkit? Or was it something else? I just find that an interesting question. I'd be interested to hear feedback via email on that. So, is this a problem? Is it really a massive problem? I mean, I realize some people hate the fact that there's, you've got chunky multiple versions of the Chromium runtime for Electron. And I can see some valid arguments against this, but having one set of Qt libraries means you have one team responsible for those libraries, and they're all revved together, and all your applications look the same together, and you don't end up with 5 different copies of Qt on your system. I can see the argument for that. But is this a bad thing or not?
I don't know. I mean, is the preserve of the Linux desktop just to make all of the hardware and peripherals work so that you can have a Chrome OS-like experience? You get a first-class browser with all the modern features, and you get some applications that enable you to do the things that web applications are simply not quite there for yet. And I'm thinking high-end video editing and things of that nature. And, most other things you can probably do in a browser or with browser-based technologies now.
Well, yeah, I kind of feel like that is what the Ubuntu user experience from the desktop point of view has tried to be, in that it creates, a way of launching your applications and a way for applications to, a standard way of them notifying you about stuff. And then other than that, tries to get out of the way and just leave the application to do what it does.
Right. So if you had a desktop that was just a window manager, the basic desktop indicators and all the controls, and then on top of that you just had a mishmash of applications from all different places, would that be appealing? It seems not. It seems most desktops seem to be successful. Most Linux desktops seem to be successful by pitching themselves in one camp or another. Elementary doesn't ship with a whole bunch of Qt applications, as far as I can tell. Neither does Endless OS. Yet KDE Neon doesn't ship with a whole bunch of GTK stuff. So you're either in one camp or the other. The two don't mix, right? But
generally,
But you could probably craft a desktop which was the basic window controls, and then a bunch of Electron apps, Slack, Chrome, and a terminal. If you wanted super future stuff, Hyper, Chrome, and Slack, and you're done. And you would probably find a fair number of developers could probably get away with doing that like a terminal browser.
Well,
and a
toss
chat
in
client.
maybe the Atom editor as well, and you're away, right?
Right. And even that's not native. So
Yeah. No, exactly. That's my point.
right.
You know, and you could add to that Skype for Linux and Discord. You know, there are numerous other things. You could even do your gaming on itch.io, which is another Electron application.
Now, obviously, people who are friends of the free software community are right now typing emails at us that every single application I've mentioned so far, I think, is non-free. And so you could argue that actually all the freedom is happening over on Linux in GTK land and Qt land and all the other toolkits. All the other stuff is non-free anyway, so therefore, in inverted commas, I don't care, because all of those things are non-free and I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. But the fact is, a significant number of people do.
Yeah, there are new applications being developed with the not traditional toolkits that are free software and uphold the values of, free software and people's rights and what have you. So I don't think that's necessarily a reflection on the tools that are used to create the software. I think it's more a reflection of the fact that in the web development sphere, open source is the commodity tool set that people use, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the thing that you're creating is an open source solution.
Right.
Certainly when it comes to services.
Yeah.
Right. So what strategies are people using to fix this? If people are identifying this as a problem, it seems to me that I think other people have identified this as a problem. I think, like, the title of this was Linux Desktop is Dead, Long Live Linux Desktop. The traditional desktop with the traditional applications that we've known for 10 plus years is dying, and some of these projects are doing things to turn that around. So, an example of that would be the Elementary project. Have done a really great job to improve the documentation for their software developer tools, the SDK, to make it easy to onboard new developers who want to write applications specifically for their platform, for Elementary. They're doing a great job there. They're also doing a good job of doing outreach. I see way more posts from people like Cassidy and Daniel reaching out to developers saying, hey, you should bring your application over to Elementary. It looks great. Put it in our app center, so that they end up with an experience where users see lots of applications that are tailored specifically for their desktop. And other free software desktops are doing similar things.
Yeah, I feel like KDE Neon has kind of, part of what that it does is a way of addressing this, because they're packaging the latest and greatest stuff and putting it in front of people rather than waiting for it to go through another distribution's testing process and be released as part of that distribution, which kind of encourages people to get on board and write stuff and put it out there, because they know that people are going to be able to get to use it easily without having to have, the AUR or the PPA or something which is maintained by someone on their behalf or by them with extra overhead. They know that they can just, get it into Git and it'll be built and shipped with Neon.
Yeah, and I'd highlight KDE just generally. We were talking about, doing things differently and innovating on the Linux desktop. I think KDE are doing more of that than any of the other desktops at the moment by some margin.
Well, the other thing, just to fair and balanced, the Gnome guys have created Gnome Builder and are making it very easy to get kick-started on creating applications, all the way through from writing your first piece of code in Gnome Builder all the way through to creating a Flatpak package which you can upload to FlatHub and get that out to users. So they're doing a similar thing from their side. And obviously Endless are doing what Mike explained to us a couple of weeks ago when we talked to him about their creating packages using content for offline scenarios. So there are people doing it, and obviously there's us speaking to developers to get them to make stuff into snaps. But I'd be interested to hear what our listeners think of this subject. I'd be interested to know what applications you recently installed that were not, something you've known about for a long time, what new things you've installed, and also what you think about the subject of non-native applications on your Linux desktop. Let us know, show@ubuntupodcast.org.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it is time for a command line love, and this is a love that I cooked up whilst I was preparing my slides for the now internationally renowned and famous Ready Steady Code, in which one of my slides was me playing badly a game of Snake. And what I did there was I recorded a window using one of the screen recorders on the native Linux desktop to an MP4 file. But then because we were embedding these into slides, I needed to embed it in such a way that it would work in the slide. So I thought, I'll turn it into a GIF. So I used ffmpeg to do that. Unsurprisingly, probably to many, but ffmpeg has one very useful feature where it can analyze a video and generate a palette. So it looks at all of the frames in that video and then generates a palette that closely matches like all of the colors that appeared in that video. And then when you do the conversion process of your video to your GIF, you can tell it this is the palette file, which it then applies throughout. So you get, in air quotes, a high quality animated GIF.
Huh.
And we will have the two commands in our show notes. The first one to generate the palette and the second one to convert your video to a GIF using that pre-created palette.
Is there any particular reason you didn't use a tool that creates GIF directly, like Peak?
I tried using Peak, but I couldn't figure out how to align. So I was like having to start my program from the command line and then had to sort of guess where it was going to appear on the screen to get Peak to appear around it and record it. And all of that was just like a game of cat and mouse. And I thought, no, there's a better way.
Or a game of Snake, perhaps.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Did you know you can come and chat with us and other listeners in between shows? Come and join us in our Telegram group at ubuntupodcast.org/telegram.
And now it is time for all your wonderful feedback, although none of it came from our Telegram channel. First up, we have D. Shimmer, who left a comment on our subreddit.
You folks have done a fantastic job of mixing up the fourth presenter position. I feel like most everyone you've had could stay on and be a great addition. Though with the exception of Laura coming back, I do like the variety as well. Joey is no exception, but every time he's on it reminds me to ask, if it isn't too personal, how is OMG Ubuntu supported? It's my go-to site for Ubuntu news, and I would gladly send some support that way if there were an easy way to do it. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's mentioned in the past, and I don't think it's particularly secret, that he has adverts on the site. And if you don't use an ad blocker, then some of that may support him. So if you want to support OMG Ubuntu, then maybe switch off your ad blocker on the site. That's the really stupidly easy way to do it.
Whitelist it in your ad blocker if you're using one.
Yeah. Or the other option is to just ping him and ask him how you could support him. And I'm sure he will let you know. But yeah, we'll pass that on to him anyway and let him know you asked. Thank you.
Yeah. Daniel Hughes left a comment on our website for the episode titled Numberless Thoughtless Goldfish.
I think those are koi, not goldfish.
Ooh, did the AI bot fail?
Yeah.
Well, I think the AI bot correctly figured out the gold colour and the fish nature, and it just couldn't, separate the other species.
More training needed.
Yeah.
Robert Orzana emailed us.
I enjoyed your conversation about Launchpad, GitLab, and GitHub. Will Ubuntu Mate follow the trend and move to GitHub or GitLab? How did we get all the way through to the feedback without mentioning Ubuntu Mate? How did that happen?
I know. Thank goodness for the feedback. That's all I say.
Which you collated.
Hey, I didn't write the feedback. I just copy and pasted it into the show notes.
Gotcha.
This is extremely timely because last week we had a company sprint. It was the Snap Sprint, where we had people from different communities working together on snaps and adding snap support to their stores. And I was joined by Luke Hallwell, who works on Ubuntu Mate Welcome and the Software Boutique. And whilst we were there that week, Luke kind of looked at me with a sad face and said, why aren't we using GitHub? And after 3 Long Island iced teas on Wednesday evening, I found myself, Luke and I sat there in the bar, migrating everything from Bitbucket to GitHub. So if you now go to github.com/Ubuntu Mate, you will find all of the projects on GitHub.
Wow.
James Starling emailed the show.
I've been listening to the debate on whether Ubuntu will ship with or without GNOME desktop extensions to emulate the GUI of Unity. Why not do both? The official Ubuntu GNOME distro ships with a bunch of extensions to simulate the GNOME 2 look and feel. From the login screen, the user can select GNOME or GNOME Classic as their desktop environment. GNOME Classic is stock GNOME with the shipped extensions enabled. The user can configure individual extensions at will or add new ones to their environment.
Yeah, so I think, the first thing is that each week, Will Cook, the Ubuntu desktop team manager, posts an update of the activity that the team has been working on that week, and they go into details about what extensions they've been reviewing and what their thoughts are about how the desktop is going to ship and be put together. And whilst you've identified that there are lots of different ways that you can tweak, tune and change the desktop experience, I think what the Ubuntu desktop team are trying to do is strike a balance to find a default that suits most people most of the time.
And also something which can be supported in the long term.
Yes, indeed.
Also worth mentioning that Ian Lane, also on the desktop team, has been posting blog posts recently as well about his perspective about the switch from Unity to GNOME. I think you'll find his posts on Medium, but they're worth reading as well.
And also Robert Ansell, who's a long-time GNOME contributor and Ubuntu desktop team member.
Everybody's blogging.
Yeah, everybody's blogging right now. Go and look for them. There's lots of good info out there. JD Tanner left a comment on our subreddit /r Ubuntu podcast.
I'd be interested to know for certain if, when Ubuntu finalises the transition to GNOME, the canonical customizations will be easily removable. I'm conscious that I don't want my Ubuntu GNOME 1704 install being hijacked.
Boom.
Well, I think what we've been discussing so far is that any customizations would be delivered via extensions, if any at all, and those could simply be turned off. There was one other interesting comment on that Reddit thread.
Oh, Lammy inquired why JD Tanner wasn't using HTOP. Was he? I'm not sure that was a reply to that thread. I think it was just a random reply to...
Do you? I think it was in response to that.
Yes, I think it was, yes.
Well played, Chris Lamb. And John, the nice guy Spriggs, who is this year's OggCamp organiser, emailed us with his command line love. And yes, you've guessed it, we have safely deposited it in our vault of love.
And that's all the feedback.
And that's all for episode 18. We'll be back next week when we'll be having more news, comment, and discussion.
Yes, send us more feedback. We didn't have a huge amount this week. You can do that in all the ways that Laura tells you every week, or just jump in our Telegram channel, ubuntupodcast.org/telegram, and give it to us there.
Awesome.
Well,
It's
very warm,
until
isn't
next
it?
time, chaps.
Yeah, it is. It's
Time for a beer.
Yeah, I think so.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. How do I win this laptop again?
Ah.